Let's start off with a story, shall we? So this story takes place on the last morning of our trip to Paris and Europe. We are leaving and we don't want to chance anything, right? So we are arriving at the airport 3.5 hours early to make sure that we do not miss our flight. So we decide to do the more expensive option, even though we figured out the train system and we could have just taken a train and a bus. We decided, no, we're just going to Uber, pay $45 and not even worry about being late. So I had booked the flights to American Airlines. So of course I look up, where's the American Airlines departure gate? They say Terminal 1. So I tell the Uber driver, Terminal 1. We take the 1-hour Uber ride to Charles de Gaulle Paris airport, and we arrive at Terminal 1, go up to the airline and say, hi, we'd like to drop our bags and then we can eat our breakfast because we're 3.5 hours early and we really just want to have a crepe and a coffee and relax before the flight. And the American Airlines lady says, no, sorry. Even though you booked this through American Airlines, you're actually using Aer Lingus to travel today. And then your final flight will be with American and we just help them operate. So you're going to have to go all the way down, walk 10 minutes down the hallway, and then take the 20-minute tram system to Terminal 3 where Aer Lingus is. Then you can drop your bags and go enjoy your morning. And I say, okay, that's exactly why we're early in case something like this happens. Are we tracking? We're tracking. So then Ian and I grab our bags, we walk the 10-minute hallway, we hop on the 20-minute tram, we get over to Terminal 3 and going, this is a huge airport. This is very, very big. I'm very glad we're early because of all this extra time that we have to spend here. So then we get up to the Aer Lingus line and it is very, very long. A lot of families go there for Disney Paris. And so there was a lot of little kids in line with their parents who had just completed a wonderful Thanksgiving week in Paris and were heading back home. Our first flight was Aer Lingus leaving Paris to Dublin, and then Dublin to Chicago was our next, then Chicago to Cleveland because I'm cheap and I tried to save like $100 or $200 flying into Cleveland rather than to fly into Columbus. So then we were going to land there and have someone pick us up. Never again. Just pay the dang money next time, India. So we do all this and we get into the Aer Lingus line. We wait for about 20 minutes and I'm like, gee, I'm really glad that we're here so early because that 3.5 hours has now been down to 2.5 hours. So we only have 2.5 hours to get through all the security and get to our gate. Again, should be plenty of time, right? Maybe not. So we finally get up there to drop our bags and we knew one of them was going to be a little overweight and we're like, okay, we'll just pay for that. So we get up there and say, hi, we're media. We're traveling with camera gear. So, here's our media pass. Is it okay that we have an overweight bag? How much is it? Is it discounted? Because most of the time airlines at least discount, if not completely waive the overweight fee, knowing that you're traveling with camera gear, just like you would for like a heavy wheelchair or a piece of medical equipment someone has to fly with. And Aer Lingus lady was like, what do you mean media pass? And we're like, we have cameras with us. And she's like, how much do they weigh? And we're like, we've literally flown to Alaska, to Italy. We've flown all around the country with cameras. No one's ever asked how much they weigh. And we're like, well, it doesn't matter. Like they're on our bags, they're on our backpacks, but our actual clothing suitcases have a few pieces of gear and things we don't need that won't break on the flight, like tripods and stand holders and stuff. So like, can we just pay for our one overweight bag and get the show on the road? And she's like, well, both your bags are overweight and I'm going to need to weigh your backpacks too, because there's an overhead bin weight limit and you can't stuff more than like, I think it was like 20 or 10 kilograms or whatever above the overhead. And we're like, okay, but we flew here and no one ever has weighed our carry-on bags, but like, sure, we're not causing an issue, like, sure. So we weigh both of our checked bags, realize they're overweight. So we start to open them up, shove Ian's stuff into my stuff and try to even it out a little bit to get the weight down. And then she asked to weigh our backpacks and both of them are not 10 kilograms, which is the limit, but they're 20 and 25 kilograms. And I'm like, yeah, like we are flying with cameras. And she's like, well, you're going to have to put some of that in your check bag and do under the plane. And we're like, you cannot. Because when you have camera gear, some of those camera batteries are lithium ion batteries, and those are forbidden under the airplane. They will cause disruptions, maybe even explode. And we do not want that. And that's like 101 with cameras. And we have learned that the hard way. So we we told her like, hey, again, camera gear. And even if it's not the batteries, we can't put our lenses, our gentle, fragile lenses, and our camera bodies underneath the airplane. That stuff's going to break. And so she's not quite understanding what we're saying. She spoke fine English, but like, she just was not like that airline is still new, I think, and they're just not comprehending what we're meaning. And so she calls over her manager and tells us to step to the side, and all these people are behind us, and we're like, great, now we're causing a scene, and we don't want to cause a scene. We just want to drop our bags and get on our plane and get our breakfast. And the manager comes over and she's like, hey, like she was very helpful, but she was like, I'm not going to try to cause problems. I just want solutions. We don't want all that weight in one bag in case it falls over on someone or falls out of the overhead bin, which I completely understand. But it didn't really make sense because then she was like, just go buy a carry-on suitcase and we'll divvy up the weight. And we're like, but you're only allowed one carry-on item per person. So now we'd be having 4 carry-on items total. And she's like, I'll just write you a note. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, no, because every time this happens, there's not enough overhead bin space. So, and I'm glad we like didn't really follow her instructions because we were like, there wasn't overhead bin space, as always. So she's like, well, Ian, you go ahead and try to figure out how to put your stuff in multiple bags and I'll write you an excuse and it'll be fine. And then India, you have to go upstairs and pay for the overweight bag because we don't have card readers right here at customer service where you check the bags, which is the first time I've ever seen that happen. So I was like, okay. So I run upstairs, go to the customer service desk, and now like time is ticking, like we were 3.5 hours early, then it came down to 2.5, and now we're about 1 hour and 45 minutes out from our flight leaving, not boarding, but leaving. And so we're like, we still have to go through customs and TSA, get the show on the road. So I go up there and I'm feeling a little nervous about like the time limit and how much time we have left. And there's only 2 workers. They're taking their sweet old time. And then this girl comes out of nowhere, like another traveler, red in the face, about to cry, panicky. And she was like, I'm so sorry. Can I like skip you? Like my flight's about to take off and I really need to talk to them. And I was like, I get it. Of course you can skip me. Like we have an hour and a half, an hour and 45, like you can ditch me. And she was like, thank you so much. And so while she's standing in line, I was just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? She told me your situation. I'm like, that's so sorry. She's like, yeah, my plane's like about to board and I'm so late. And I was like, what time does it take off? And she's like, 1:15. And I'm like, that's what time my flight takes off. Like, I was like, honey, like you're good. It's like 11:30. like I'm nervous, but I'm not that nervous. So anyway, she goes ahead of me and it's a little bit of an issue and takes more time. And then finally it's my turn. And so I just show the guy what I need to show him. But then he like takes a phone call and I'm just standing there like not speaking French going like, pardon, merci, like please help me. And then finally takes my information down, writes everything down. I pay him the 70 euros, go back downstairs. And Ian, instead of going to purchase another carry-on bag, which I'm still glad he didn't do, he has taken his gear out and rolled it up into a sweatshirt, all the non-fragile pieces like the batteries and like the stuff you would use to build the camera body out instead of like the lenses and things that are more fragile. Wrapped it in a sweatshirt and looks like, Huck Finn has it like perched over his shoulder. So that's going to be one of his carry-on items. And so we're like, okay, great. At least you did that. So we go back up to the lady and they thankfully were like, all right, fine. You'll just pay the 70 you already did. And now you can drop these bags. And I'm like, ma'am, like, could we please speed this up? I know this took a lot of time. Like, I don't want to miss our flight. And she's like, you're not going to miss your flight. You're not going to miss your flight. And then they still have to go and like make sure everything's the right weight. We weigh them all again. She checks Ian's weird bag situation out. She's like, whatever, I'll just like overlook it. But tough luck getting on your American flight with all these extra carry-ons. And we're like, you literally just told us to do this. So anyway, she finally gives us our boarding passes, approves everything. And I was like, okay, great. Like, where do we go? She's like, well, you're going to have to run. You're all the way over there. And like, line 68, gate 68 or something. And I was like, you told me this whole time. We'd be fine. And here we are stressing. And so at this point, I'm getting a little more nervous. Now we're about like 45 minutes out from the plane leaving. And again, we still have to go through all of the security. So we run up, not one escalator, not 2 escalators, but like we're following the path to this gate. And it's like, oh my gosh, like escalator after escalator, walkway after walkway. And it's another like 20-minute walk just to get to the security checkpoint for our gate. And so I'm like, praying we'll be okay. And so we finally get up there, and first thing that goes wrong is I say, I pull my film, my traditional film that I travel with for trips, out of my bag because I learned this lesson in LA. And I was like, can you please hand check this stuff? This is undeveloped film. And if you scan it, it will most likely ruin it or severely damage it. You know, it could completely wipe it out or give it light leaks, overexpose it. And I got new film this time, guys. I got Porta 400. Like, that is not inexpensive. I spent about $120 on the film, and I have to spend about $50 to $60 just to develop it all. And so I go up with my Ziploc bag and I say, please hand check. And she goes, not possible. And at this point, I'm like, what do you mean not possible? Like, she spoke English, like we were communicating. I was like, no, hand check. And she's like, it's not possible. Everything goes through the scanner. And I'm like, ma'am, can you please hand check my film before I sue you? And she was just like, no, it has to go through the scanner for security. And like, we did not have a negative experience in France. Like, people say the stereotype is French people are rude, and they really weren't. Like, they were, you know, specific and punctual, but no one was really like purposefully rude. Even this lady wasn't purposely rude, but man, oh man, were they specific. This was the most like tooth and nail specific airport I've ever seen with security. And on one hand, like, I'm grateful we have some people really like helping out with security. Like, you need to take that job seriously. But on the other, I was like, what? And so my film goes through that scanner. I still have not developed it. I have no idea if all that film was ruined. I pray that it wasn't, because it's a lot of money and a lot of memories that I was really happy to have. I don't know if I'll travel with film much more after this. It's getting pretty out of hand, but go through that. And then we put all of our backpacks through, and they were like shoes off, laptops out, cameras out. And so we in total had 8 cameras with us. So we took all our cameras out, we have all of our shoes out, all of our laptops out, all the electronics on the trays, everything like we're supposed to, and we go through. And then we're waiting because the people in front of us, I think they got racially profiled by these TSA agents in France. And it was really like unsettling, not even quite unsettling, just I was like, come on. Like, the group in front of us were definitely from a Middle Eastern country. They had hijabs on and they spoke, I believe, Arabic, and they had obviously done some Christmas shopping. They had lots of like Chanel perfumes and Gucci perfumes and skincare and really nice like hand lotions, like nice stuff in these bags. And all of it to me were like the little travel sizes, you know, like the exact right amount of fluids you're allowed to bring on a carry-on bag. And the French TSA agents were like absolutely not having it. And they were taking every single Chanel bag and little box that were like gift wrap, like nice gift wrapping you pay for. They were unwrapping everything and taking it out and saying that they had to check and make sure that it was actually that liquid in the bottle. And I was like, y'all, that's not cool. And I literally said something to the family. I was like, I am so sorry this is happening. Like, I've never seen an airport be this meticulous about it. And they were just like, what do we do? Like, whatever. And it was just insane. But that took so long, so utterly long, that they kept going through their stuff. And they only had like 2 agents working this very busy day. It's the weekend after Thanksgiving. You'd think that like they'd have more people. Like, obviously a lot of travelers were coming internationally. And so they were taking so long that the people kept doing that. And then they start going into the bag behind mine and the one after mine. And, you know, they had already done Ian's stuff. And then I was just like, my bag is just sitting there. And so I literally was like trying to flag them down, like looking over at the time going, okay, we're losing time. And like, I'm starving. I haven't used the bathroom. I need to fill up my water bottle. Like, I need to get through customs and get on this plane. And so they're taking their sweet old time. And so I basically flagged someone down. I'm like, I'm sorry, like my backpack's right there. We've been waiting for like 20, 30 minutes at this point. Like, could you please like finalize the check? And like, is it done? Like, can I have it? And so she was like, oh yeah. She pulls it over and then she pulls up the pictures of the inside and they're blank. And she was like, sorry, like it didn't go through the scanner. And I'm like, what do you mean it didn't go through the scanner? I watched it go through the scanner. You shoved my film through the scanner. Like it's on the other side of the glass. It went through the scanner. And so she was like, I have to push it through again. And I was like, okay, great. So she pushes it through again. And then she goes, you didn't take all your cameras out. I told you to take your cameras out. Like in a tone, like you're in trouble. Excuse me. And I was like, ma'am, I have to board this plane in 20 minutes. We are losing time. I'm starving. I didn't say all this, of course. I was just like, merci. And I'm like, honey, like, I took all my cameras out. What do you mean? And she opens it up and there's my 70-200 lens, not a camera, a lens. And she's like, what's this? And I was like, ma'am, that's a lens. Have you never seen a camera before? My camera bodies are all in front of me in one of those bins. And I'm like, here are all my cameras and here's my laptop. Like, that's just a lens. And she was like, we're going to have to put it through one more time. And I was like, oh my good Lord. So she puts it through one more time. Obviously, nothing happens, no explosives, everything's fine. And I'm like, okay, can I now please take my stuff and go? And so even though we had, like, Ian had configured all his cameras in the right order, he had to repack everything again. I had to repack everything again, whatever. Slide our shoes on and we go. Then we go on another trek all the way around through another security checkpoint. And by the time we get to our gate, they're literally like boarding now. And I'm like, okay, I'm super dehydrated. We just took 3.5 hours to drop our bags and get through security, unheard of. So I ran to go fill our waters up. And by the time I come back, like, it's just me and Ian as the last people basically to do our little scanning and then get on the little walkway to get to the plane. So we're on the walkway, and I guess there was 1 or 2 families behind us, because while we're standing on that walkway, you know, right before you actually get on the plane, there's like joysticks and buttons that kind of, I think it's called a walkway, like a terminal walkway. And it comes up to the plane like an accordion, and like, you know, that's the thing you stand on. While we're standing on that thing, this kid who had very apparently been to Disney Paris because he had a Lightning McQueen shirt on, runs up to the board and starts slamming on the joystick, moving it around, hitting all the buttons, and it starts beeping, and his parents are doing absolutely nothing. Yeah, like, don't want to judge anyone's parenting style, but come on, let's be a little more on hands here. We're getting on a plane and you're letting your kid just like mash all these real buttons, like not a toy, like real buttons on this terminal walkway. And they're like, come here, Baxter, please stop. I'm like, okay. And so he finally stops, but it's like beeping now. It's like, meh. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever. Like, we're just get on this plane and forget this. So we get on the plane, find some space for our stuff, and we're like, okay, great. This is the first of 3 flights on a very, very long travel day. The first was this one from Paris to Dublin, and then we had Dublin to Chicago, the 8-hour flight, and then Chicago to Cleveland, and then Ian's parents are picking us up in Cleveland to save some money. Again, stupid idea. Don't do it. So we finally sit on the plane, and we're like, okay, we're ready to take off. And then 10 minutes go by, and then 20 minutes go by. And then 35 minutes go by, and I'm looking at my watch going, we were supposed to take off 35 minutes ago, and we only have an hour of a layover in Dublin, Ireland, and I really, really still have not eaten, and I really, really need to poop. And I'm like, can we get the show on the road, please? And then the captain comes over the loudspeaker and says, let me do a French accent. We are so sorry to announce that we are having trouble with the terminal walkway. It appears that it is not separating from the plane, and we have to call an engineer to see if he can come over and assist. Thank you for your patience. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the freaking child who had mushed all the buttons literally broke something, and we were stuck from departing. So at this point, Ian and I are like, we're never having kids. And we were just like, that's a joke, but we were just like, goodness gracious. About 15 minutes later, they figured it out and we start pulling down the runway. Amazing. But still, I was flabbergasted. Because of that delay, however, by the time we landed in Dublin, Ireland, we had, I think, 30 or maybe 40 minutes from the time we had wheels down to the time our next flight was leaving. Not boarding, but leaving. So I'm like, we have to book it through this airport. And again, India's got to pee. India's cranky. She hasn't had her coffee or her breakfast, and I need a little snack. And it was Dublin, Ireland, and Ian's Irish. And so I was like, it'd be fun to just like take a breather and like look around the airport and grab a little, you know, goodie for like a Christmas present for his family and get a beer or something. Like, I want it to be fun. No, not fun. So as soon as we get off, they make us go through customs, which I'm like, okay, that makes sense. We flew from country to country. But not just customs, they made us go through TSA security again. And I've never seen that happen before. Like, usually once you've gone through it once, you have your liquid now in your bottle again. You have everything back in the right order. And they're like, no, you need to go through customs again. And everyone on our flight was like, what? Like, we were all like, we just came through customs and security. Why are we going through customs and security a second time? So It was not fun. And we had to take our shoes off again, take all our cameras out of our bags, take all of our laptops out of our bag. Very similar situation. Our stuff goes through and then we're standing there and waiting and they've never seen a camera before in their life. And then Ian's bag goes through and they're like, what's this? What's this lens? Where have you been? Did you buy this camera there? Do we need to charge you tax? And I'm like, oh my goodness, can we please hurry? And I look over and the sign is flashing that our plane is boarding. It's like final call. And I'm like, okay, amazing. Because it took so long. We only had 35 minutes and it took so long to go through security again. Then we go through the customs line and the guy's asking us all these questions like, do you have meats and cheeses? Did you buy these cameras in America or in Europe? Should we pay you tax? Do I have to penalize you? Because apparently you can get penalized if you buy something like gear in another country. I'm like, then what's the whole point of booking the flight to go buy it? I have many questions about the way the world works. So we're like, please, sir, we bought these cameras from home. People travel with cameras all the time. Vacation cameras, cell phone cameras. They are cameras from us. We have paid our tax. We are U.S. citizens. Please get me home. And he's like, whatever, sure, I believe you. And finally, we get through everything, go all the way through and go straight to our gate. And they're like, we're boarding, like get your butts on the plane. This is not how I wanted to walk into an 8-hour flight. You know what I mean? Like I want to be like rested, full tummy, have peed or pooped. You know what I mean? I didn't get to do any of that. First world problem. And so I was really frustrated about it, but I was like, whatever, like just get me on this plane. We get there, and of course, we are like the dead last people to board, and all the overhead bin space is already taken. And they were like, you're gonna have to check your bags, like your carry-ons. And we're like, yet again, lithium-ion batteries, camera gear, fragile lenses, thousands of dollars of gear. We literally physically can't check the bags. And thankfully, the staff on Aer Lingus was very kind, and they were all like, okay, we understand. We're so sorry. We'll see if we can move some stuff around. So they go through and they're pushing some bags over, taking coats out, asking people to put their coats by their feet. And these people on the plane were giving us such a hard time. Like, why do these people have to put we have to put our coats. I'm trying to do Irish. That's not Irish. It was like some kind of Indian accent. They were like, why do I have to put no, that's still Indian. Why do I... Oh, you're going to have to put your coat. There it is. You're going to have to put your coat by your feet. That's a little more Luna Lovegood than I would like. Oh, Harry, I can see them too. But either way, they were like, please put your coat by your feet. And they're all giving us a hard time. And this guy, literally one of the passengers was like, I don't understand. They're the last people to board. And why do they get to have 3 overhead bags? And you're asking me to put my backpack by my feet? And I'm like, sir, I literally was like, sir, we just traveled for work. We're exhausted just like you. I will literally put your bag by my feet if we need to. And he's like, no. And I'm like, can we just get them on the plane? I really just fully think airports should not be booking full flights, accounting for everyone to have at least one overhead bag space. And then you get on and there's no overhead bag space. ? They need to stop doing this. And they should also be having extra storage just in case someone with like, I don't know, a camera bag. Or there were people with like full on giant traveler, like, baby strollers that fold up and take up way more space than a normal backpack would up there in the overhead. And I'm like, y'all, you're giving us a hard time for our backpacks holding camera gear when you're taking up 5 rows of space because someone didn't like compact their stroller down enough. We got to figure the system out, like have extra space for these people, be accommodating. So I don't know if we're flying Aer Lingus again with film gear, probably not. But we finally push everything in the right spots. I'm like, okay, great. And I look around for our seats because I'm pretty sure I booked seats for Ian and I together. I'm pretty sure like I paid a little extra to do that. And I look over and I only see one of the 2 seats. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did I like only book one flight? There's no way. We had boarding passes. They let us in. And then I notice my seat is a middle seat in between a bunch of random dudes. And Ian's seat is a middle seat in front of a bunch of random dudes, the row ahead of me. And this is the 8-hour flight, you know, like it's not a big deal, but it's like, I don't want to sit between a bunch of boring business guys, like when I could be snuggled with my husband for 8 hours. So I'm like, maybe someone will trade. Not a hand went up in the sky. And we were like, okay, bye babe. See you in 8 hours. So then I'm like, whatever, we're on the plane. We're doing it. We're heading home. And then I click my little screen, the little screen that gives me hope and peace when I'm on a long flight so I don't get anxious, the one that makes you watch the movies. And my screen is broken and it doesn't turn on for an 8-hour flight. So I shed a quiet tear and I put my AirPods in and I just like try to doze off. And then I'm like, okay, the second that I see one of the nice staff ladies, I will ask her if she can reset it. But of course, it takes forever before the little sign comes off and they come back through. And so I finally asked, I was like, could you please reset my screen? And she was like, 1 second, we're about to do the hot meal. And so they had to go all throughout the whole plane, give everyone their food. And then she came over and reset my screen. So I had it for like the last 4.5 hours I had it, thankfully. But the first 3-ish, I did not. It's whatever. It's a first world problem, right? Like, oh my gosh, my screen didn't work on my long flight from Europe home. But it's still one of those things. It's like, come on. I paid like $1,500 for this flight. Can I at least watch my movie? Can I watch my Disney movies, please? So anyway, all that went down. I watched Dear Evan Hansen on that flight. It was so good. So good. Ben Platt's just a national treasure. Anyway, so we finally get home. Then we get sort of. We land in Chicago and then we go. The last flight is Chicago to Cleveland. And then we had Ian's parents pick us up in Cleveland. And so we're waiting by the baggage terminal going, yeah, we made it. Our bags are gonna be here soon. And we're waiting by the luggage terminal, looking for our bags. And they don't come. Amazing. So then we go to the customer service desk. It's like 11:30 at night. She was really nice, thankfully. And we're like, hey, where are our bags that we paid for, that we paid a lot of money for, that we had such an issue getting on board for? Where are they? Please. And she was like, oh, I just got a call. It looks like they're still in Cleveland. And we're like, yay. So we still don't have them. And it's been 4 days since we landed. Don't know where they are. She gave us a tracking number. We've tried to use it. Doesn't say anything. We even called. She said they're still in Cleveland, but they should be out for delivery soon. But that was a day ago. So I have no idea. And we better get them back. Because like I had my nice stuff. Like I wore my best outfits. I have my nice perfume. I have my nice shoes. I have all of the Christmas presents in there that we spent a lot of money on while we were traveling. So Indy's going to be really, really sad if we lose all that. But anyway, yeah. So that's just one of the stories of our travels. Yay. And it's just to show that almost anything can go right or wrong when you're traveling. And thankfully that was like probably the worst of the trip, was just getting back home. And if that's the worst, I'll take it. You know, like that's not so bad. But today I want to illustrate some of the pros and cons of traveling, some of the things we recommend doing and what not to do, and hopefully give you a little insight to help you out on your next trip. So with that very long intro, it's time for the theme song. All right, so obviously this is part 2 of our Europe recap story, and we need to finish answering some of your questions that you guys asked. One of the main questions I got was like, hey, pros and cons to international travel. What are your thoughts on it? And what do you think about your own trip? And I feel like it's kind of a funny question because like the main thing is like, what do you mean con to international travel? Like anytime we travel, there'll always be things that go wrong, but like, yes, you should definitely still internationally travel. Like things can always go wrong anywhere. So if traveling is something you want to do, definitely don't just be limited by your own country. Like I'm very pro getting a passport and exploring the world. Cons, I guess, like obviously if you're used to just traveling around the States, the biggest one is just it's expensive. It's a little more expensive than, you know, anything you would do here. Sokka. Sorry, he's eating something. So you do have to save up for it a bit more. The tickets to the initial flights usually tend to be the most expensive thing of traveling internationally. If you already live in Europe or Canada, sometimes those flights are like dirt cheap. So it really just depends, you know. But I mean, my father-in-law just went to Vegas recently and his plane ticket, I think, was like $650 just to go to Las Vegas. And that was like one ticket to Paris kind of thing. So it's really not that much more expensive if you're paying similar rates just to go to like LA or somewhere else in the country. It's all perspective too. I guess a couple other cons would be like, okay, if you're traveling internationally, you might get sick and not really know what to do. I had the tiniest little like 24-hour bug while we were traveling. We just went to a pharmacy, got some vitamin C and some throat spray. I was just fine. You might lose something and not get it back. Hopefully that's not the case with our luggage, but who knows? That's just a risk you would take with any travel. And then the other thing is like you could not know the laws or the language and get in trouble or something. But like, just be smart, do your research, and you don't have to be stupid about traveling internationally. Just like you would anywhere else. Like, put in the work, do your research, and it won't be so bad. Pros for international travel: more experiences. Like I think in the way that people recommend college to everyone as like a rite of passage into adulthood and something that kind of matures you and socializes you, I'm going to put international travel up on that list as well. I really, really think that like you grow so much when you travel and you learn so much about yourself and other cultures and the world that it's one of the best things you can do for yourself and for other economies too. Like, I don't know if people always think of it that way, but it's not just like selfish to go and travel somewhere. Like, you're stimulating an economy in another part of the globe and you get to like support God's people there. And there's so much more than people think. I think also that people tend to view traveling as equivalent to vacationing, and vacationing as self-indulgent, selfish, like I'm going to get a lot of experience. I'm going to eat all the food. I'm going to like pamper myself and blah, blah, blah. And you can, I guess, if you want to vacation that way. But if you're traveling, if you are looking at the world that God created for us to play in, if you are taking part in something beautiful like culture and experience and history, like I genuinely think that travel makes us more educated, more self-aware, more humble, more empathetic to other people, more cultured. And to me personally, like increases my faith. Like when I can go somewhere across the globe and people watch and go, wow, like God created those people. He loves them each as a whole and individually, just like he loves me. I mean, how vast is the Lord's love? Like that kind of, buddy, please stop chewing cords. Sorry, my cat's going crazy. That kind of realization only really happens when we're out of our comfort zones and we're not just thinking about ourselves and our neighborhoods and our own context all the time. Like oftentimes life can only feel as big as we make it. And when you're sitting in the same four walls every single day, only, concerning yourself with your own problems, it feels like that's all there is. But the second that you can step out of that, you can really become self-aware and just be like, wow, Lord, like you are teaching me so much by showing me your people. And I think it's one of the best things you can do for yourself. So, con, some people think that traveling internationally is dangerous, and like, yes and no to me. I don't think that's ever been a factor in me traveling. Like, I've traveled a couple times at times where things were a little more like heated, I guess, and I've been a little more aware. The first time I went abroad, we were flying from America to Greece, and this was, I think, 1 or maybe 2 weeks after I think Heathrow Airport had a big bomb threat or something. This was like 2017 or whatever. And I remember we didn't tell like my mom or something that we had a layover in the Heathrow Airport because we were like, well, I don't need to like concern her. Like, I am not concerned because to me, after one of those things happens, after a big scary almost, the security is heightened anyway. So I feel a little bit more safe. But, then I also went to Israel pre-COVID and pre the Israel-Palestine Gaza war. And so, I didn't feel unsafe there at all, really. But like people were walking around, like militias walking around every single day, like fully armed and ready to go. And you're just like, okay, like there you are. It's all about context. So like you obviously need to be safe. Don't go into a war zone just because you're like, I want to see the pyramids. Like don't do that unless it's completely, clear. There was actually a level 2 warning on France while we were traveling for, out of country tourists, but it was just because of the political unrest and there'd been some demonstrations and protests. And I'm like, to be fair, that's happening right here, right now in America. Like I don't know, like, wow, okay, this is terrible, but while we were traveling, there was a really awful, very, very, very racist protest situation going on in our own hometown. Like, while we were away, we were looking at the news, and our friends and family were like, amazing. So you can't say that staying home is going to be safer than going abroad. And the unfortunate truth is that, like, I feel more nervous that someone could have a firearm in a movie theater here in my own city and, do something stupid, or that our loved ones who are going to school and sending their kids to school would get injured, or that I, as a woman walking to my car at night in the downtown area, could have something happen to me. I'm more concerned about that here in America than I am in another country. Because I think they also treat tourists as like vital parts of their economy, and they don't want to mess with that ecosystem. The things I'm more nervous about when I travel abroad are more so like pickpocketers and losing something important like the passport or a camera or something. It's more like theft related than like personal harm. So I don't know. If you travel around the States and you don't want to travel overseas because of safety, I feel like that's kind of a non-issue, or it just doesn't seem to be a fair argument. But then the last pro, obviously you gain perspective on yourself and on your privilege for sure. And then the con is things can and will go wrong. That's just kind of inevitable. Okay. Another question someone asked about our trip was, would you do anything differently? And honestly, yeah, but not that much. I think the best thing that we did was, because we were traveling in late fall / early winter, there was almost no other tourists, very, very few crowds comparatively. We had heard, going to the Louvre is terrible in the summer because it's peak tourism season. It's so crowded, everyone's there. And we had some school groups, local French school groups, but very, very minor crowds. It did not take me long at all to get up close to the Mona Lisa. It did not take long at all to look at the victory statues. It was just so enjoyable for that reason of the lower crowds. Versailles was, not that crowded at all. And the catacombs were at capacity, but it was very maybe 20 or 30 of us down there at one time. And the people who were there were either locals, or it felt like other European tourists. We really did not see that many other Americans traveling at all. It was pretty sparse. So that was kind of cool to feel like we were a part of the local culture. I think the biggest thing that was the con about traveling in the colder months, obviously, is that we had to pack more coats and layers, which meant we had to pay a little more in the luggage. We could have packed lighter. We've talked about that. We totally could have. And I would next time if I was you and I was going in the winter, I would say just, hey, pack a little lighter. The weather was a little unpredictable. Thankfully, all things considered, it was just chilly most days. And we still got a couple really nice days, 50s and 60s. It only really rained 2 days of the trip, maybe 3. It was overcast for most of it, but we had a couple days where we saw really gorgeous sunrise, sunset, and I felt very blessed to have ditched the crowds, had lower prices in the off season, and still gotten to see some of those things. Very cool. Obviously, I want to go back in the summer, to all these locations, but specifically to Paris, because I think we got to do the museums with no lines, no wait time. So if I went back in the summer to get to see the gardens in bloom and to see everything with full greenery, I think that would be great, because now I got all I got the history parts out of the way of the museums. And now I could go and enjoy the more subtle parts without worrying about, the weather being so crazy. But yeah, I think my only regrets about this trip, only things I would really do differently, is I do wish we had a few more nights that we chose to spend out in Paris. I think we actually had a whole week in Paris, and most of the nights we could have gone out to a little nightclub, a little jazz bar, little live music scenario. But I think we were just trying to save a little bit more money, because at that point in the trip, we were okay, we ate a lot of food, and Paris was more expensive than Italy. So we were prioritizing nicer, breakfast and dinners. And then we just got a cheap bottle of wine to have back at the hotel, rather than go out and spend another $40 or $50 on cocktails in Paris at a jazz club that has an overhead fee. So I do wish we had a little more of that experience to go out and listen to some live music in the evenings. But also because it was cold, it's like, like once we were in and done and the sun set at like 4:00. So once we were like, okay, we're done with the main things, we'll like go get dinner and walk back. We're like, do we really need to go back out again? So we opted to stay in most nights and did like, we just watched some French movies, like our version of French movies, watched Notre Dame, Beauty and the Beast, Pink Panther, and just kind of had like some fun evenings in, which was cool. I would have, the other big one, I would just pack less. I think that's the biggest tip when you're going to Europe, especially if you're bringing like a wheelie suitcase. You can't really bring those around on the cobblestone streets. It's just not convenient. So less overall, and I think we talked about this in the last episode, less gear and a little bit less on the clothes, and then you can always get like a laundromat and just do something like that. Okay, so on this trip specifically, some other things that I would suggest not doing. I think Ian shared this on the first episode, but he told like the car story with the diesel and not knowing what this extra AdBlue thing was. So something that sounded like such a great deal, like $70 car rental, which was a great deal. Then we had to pay $55 in gas and then like $10 in AdBlue, and it just added up all randomly. We still need to call them and see if they can like give us a discount or something. But just do your research. If you're renting a car in another country, do your research on some of those things first. Like he watched a couple videos on how to drive in Italy and we were prepared that way, but neither of us were prepared for like the random, like driving a diesel vehicle around a medieval town and all that random stuff. But maybe another thing, like just don't rent a car going to Lake Como. Like it was helpful, but it was also unhelpful. So maybe that's just a rule of thumb. Again, don't overpack. Another tip, especially in Europe, just lighter the better. And that is one thing of like the con of going in the winter. You know, again, in the summer you can have way lighter stuff, but okay, another thing to don't do, don't go so fast. And I'm glad like we had the luxury of kind of slowing down because it was a longer trip. Like the work shoots were spread out enough that it didn't feel like work every single day. And it also didn't feel like every single day of rest was this tour and then that dinner reservation, blah, blah, blah. We tried to not plan all the details ahead of time, but just like maybe having 2 to 3 ideas of what we wanted to do each day, but letting it be open to what it was. So we didn't have any dinner reservations. We didn't have any, tickets until we were there for museums. Once we got to see like, okay, let's look at the weather for the week. Which days are going to be rainy? Let's do the museum on those days. Like which days do we want to try to catch the sunset at the Eiffel Tower? Let's try to do that on a good weather day. And just kind of planning things as it went instead of, having a full day by day, minute by minute itinerary, because that just makes you feel stressed. And there were some days like, we were like, oh, we have to hurry up and catch this metro to catch this lunch. And then we're going to miss this. And we missed a few things because of that. But overall, I'm glad I didn't like try to hyper, vigilantly plan every single second out, because that just isn't as fun. Okay. I would say don't use the stupid data plan from your carrier. So we didn't know what this situation was going to be like, because when I've traveled internationally, have just used the Wi-Fi and not really needed service. But because we were working with clients, I knew I needed to communicate with them and confirm a few things and find our Airbnb. And because we were going to be using trains and planes and cars, I was like, okay, I will probably just buy a SIM card when I'm there. So we get there and we're at the airport and I'm looking for the SIM cards, and it doesn't seem to be clear exactly how much they are and what that data limit is. And so as soon as we land, we get a text from Verizon that's like, hey, we see you're international, so why don't you use our data plan? You just text and call like normal and we'll charge you $12 a day. And I'm like, I don't want to be charged $12 a day. That feels really steep. But the biggest shoot was in the front of the week. So I'm like, I'll just do it for today and tomorrow, spend $24, solve the problem, communicate with my clients. And then once we're at our hotels with Wi-Fi, we'll just do that. So we did that for the first 2 days. And then I tried to turn it off. And then I kept getting the notice like, we noticed you triggered your $12 a day international data plan again. Thank you. You'll be billed at the end of the month. And I'm like, I turned it off. Like why am I still getting charged? And it was when people would text me. I was still getting charged. And so I was like, no, like that's nuh-uh. So for the whole first week, we did not know how to turn it off completely. And so I'm pretty sure we racked up a stupid bill for that. So I'm going to have to call them and see if we can figure that out, because I didn't use it. I was like, I used it for like 2 days, charged me for the 2 days. But after that, it seems insane. So I eventually just shut my whole cellular off. And then our friend who lives in Europe told us about this thing called Airalo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's very inexpensive. It was like $4 for 1 gig of data for a week. And that gig goes really fast. So we had to like re-up it once. So it was like $8 or something. But that was so much better. And you just pick the country you're going to be in, trigger it for that, and then you turn off your cellular and it gives you like a secondary number. It didn't work for texting, but that was fine because I didn't really need to text anyone. So it worked though for Google Maps, for Airbnb, for all that stuff. iMessage was just the one that was weird. But then you can like WhatsApp if you need to. So that's my biggest like piece of advice there. I don't know if anyone has better advice on eSIMs or anything else, but it was like an eSIM card and it was very cheap and affordable. And I was like, Verizon sitting here conning everyone. So, okay. Another thing, don't forget when you're traveling to ask questions. Quick story here. We were really proud of ourselves for figuring out the France subway system pretty quickly. We were like asking a friend what to do, and he explained that you just need to have the Navigo app on your phone and you can buy your metro tickets there, easy peasy. And if you get them in bulk, he said it's a reduced fare. So we're like, great, reduced fare, we love that. So we get on our app, we see the Navigo tickets and we select reduced fare, thinking that's all we have to do. And we got our 10 tickets, and then once they're expired, you just can pay again. So we select the reduced fare ticket because that's kind of what we thought we were supposed to do. And all week it worked like a charm. Like you just go, just like you would in the New York subway, tap your phone, use a ticket, you can board the train or the bus and get anywhere. And so the very, very last day, we were like so proud of ourselves. We're like, we did it. We got the tickets. Like we feel like locals now. We've been scanning our phones. Very, very last day, Ian and I take pictures at the Eiffel Tower at 11 p.m. in our cute little outfits to celebrate our anniversary. We have this tradition of renewing our vows, sort of. We write letters to each other on our anniversary every year or near our anniversary, and then take a time to like read them to each other and reflect on the year and kind of celebrate our marriage. So we've done this for the 4th year now in a row, and we wanted to do it by the Eiffel Tower. So we do it. It's beautiful. It's such a lovely night. And it's our last night in Paris. So we're like amazing. Like we feel like millionaires right now. So we're like heading down to the subway. We're like, let's get on the train home and pop open our last bottle of super cheap wine, watch a movie, and pack up and get ready to go for tomorrow. And so we go down to the train station. We tap our phones like we always do. It lets us through like it always has. And then as soon as we go through, this guy stops us, this random dude, and says, stop, I need to see your passports. And we're like, no. Like there's so many people around the Eiffel Tower asking for money, asking to sell us dumb, cheap souvenirs, random people. And so we're like, no. And we start walking. He's like, no, I'm security. And he points out a security badge on his arm. And I'm like, I'm sorry. We don't trust, we don't know you. Like, we don't know if you are security, if you're just saying that. And he was like, no, I'm security. I work with this, train station line. Like, I need to see your badges. It's a routine check. And we're like, what? And there's like 4 or 5 of them. So I'm also like, okay, maybe this is a random, con, but I don't think so, because all the people in the ticket office are right there. I don't think they'd let these random guys out here. And they had the logo on their sleeve of the train. So I was like, all right, maybe he's telling the truth. But I was still very suspicious. So I show him my ID. Ian shows him his ID. And then he's like, can I see your tickets? And we were like, well, we used our phone. He's like, let me see your phone. And so he like scans our phones. And then he's like, you have the wrong ticket. Come with me. And we're like, what do you mean? Like, we paid for our reduced fare tickets. We went through. We're good. Like we're just going to our hotel. Like, what's happening? And he's like, come with me. And he just walks over to the corner and has another, security officer in the same outfit come up. And this guy was like, hey, you have a child ticket and you didn't pay for an adult ticket. And we were like, oh, sorry, honest mistake. Like, we didn't know. We just thought that when you bulk purchase, you get the reduced fare rate. So we just bulk purchased on our phone. We didn't know the difference. It doesn't specify on your phone. It just said like, bundle of tickets. So we said bundle of tickets and we paid for them. Like, we already paid. So I was like, oh, we're sorry. Like, can we pay the difference? Can we just pay for the adult ticket? It's like €1 more. You know what I mean? And they go, no, you are getting fined 35 euros each for having the wrong ticket. And we're like, I'm sorry? Like, honest mistake. We just booked we just did the thing through the phone to get our, we're like, I'm sorry, like, we didn't understand. Like, is there a grace period? Can we just pay the difference? Like, what do you mean? And this again, guys, we go through our entire week not having anything like this happening. No security checkpoints. People didn't even check our passports coming into that country. So I'm like, what is happening? And so, like, I totally get if we did the wrong ticket, you know, and we owe a couple extra bucks for paying for the adult one. I understand that. And I understand if people were trying to abuse that system, but we weren't. It was like genuinely an honest mistake. And there was nothing at all on the Apple Wallet that showed the difference between the reduced tickets or not. And I'd seen someone online say, yeah, you just book it through because then it's reduced rate when you buy the bundle. So that's what I thought I was doing, is just buying a bulk bundle. And he was not having it with us at all, being very like, he was like, cash or card, you have to pay right now. And I'm like, I still don't know if this is real. And it's our last night and we're literally about to like go home. And so they're just being very pushy. And I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I was like, I was like, I'm sorry, can I talk to your manager? And he's like, I can take you to the police. And I was like, bro, I don't want to go to the police. I was like, can I talk to someone else? Like, I don't know if you're understanding, like, we did not know. Why are we being penalized 70 or whatever, 35 plus 35, is that 70? Yeah, 70 euros. I was like, why are we being asked to pay 70 euros? Like, we have no idea what's happening. And they were like, no, there's no grace period. You can't get out of this. You're paying right here and right now, basically. And so this lady eventually came up and I was just like, ma'am, I'm sorry. Like, we have just been asked by 100 people on the street next to the Eiffel Tower if we can, you know, pay $1 for a cigarette, buy their Eiffel Tower lookalike toy. Like, I'm like, how do we know this is real? And she's like, we're blah, blah, blah. We're from the security and you have the child ticket. So you're getting fined. You should know better, basically. And I was like, ma'am, we're in a different country. Like, we didn't know, and we're happy to pay the adult fare rate. We just literally did not know, and we're following the advice of the internet, and you know, it's right here on our phone. We were just following the prompts. And she's like, well, the first thing I would do in another country is go to the ticket desk and ask for the rules. It's like, okay, I guess so. Like, she was fair. I was like, honey, you're doing your job. I'm just like flabbergasted. So, and it was very weird. We got randomly selected, probably because we looked out of place, but it was just so annoying. So anyway, that all happened. We paid our stupid 70 euro fine and then we went on our way. So the moral of that story is do your research and ask questions so that you don't get a random fine. Okay. Those are the things, well, you know, what not to do while traveling, specifically in this trip. And then the last thing I would just want to say, things to do while traveling. AirTags in all your gear, please. I have one in my camera bag, on my camera directly, and we wanted to put one in our luggage. We didn't. Now that's kind of biting us in the butts because we don't know where it is. Maybe making sure you have rail aid insurance if you're buying longer trains, like not the metro trains, but the longer trains might be a good idea. Check with your credit card companies before you go as well to make sure there's no international transaction fees. Learn a few phrases in the language of the country you're going to so you don't look like an idiot or a stupid American. I probably look like an idiot, but honestly, I was saying like merci and croissant. I was doing a little better than Emily in Paris. Download the Translate app on your phone. It should already just be there if you have an Apple phone. I'm not sure about Androids, but really, really helpful to have so you can scan menus and take pictures and kind of see what things are. And then obviously sign up for that Airalo service for cell service and data. And then the last thing is just get a small amount of currency, you know, ready to go so you have some cash so that in case of using credit cards, like some of the times like restaurants or little trinket shops would only be cash only. So you want to make sure you have money for that. But this was a long episode. I have a meeting I have to get to, but I am so grateful you guys stuck around for it. I hope that you have the best time if you're traveling soon. Let me know where you want to go in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe for this blah-bitty blah-bitty blue, and we will be back here soon for another episode of Indian Stuff. Thanks, guys. Bye.